On a normal day, the main character Taechai and his childhood friend Rin were on their way back home. Rin was a member of the tennis club, and she advised Taechai to also join a club soon to avoid wasting his talent. Suddenly, Taechai noticed a young man riding a bicycle towards Rin, and at that moment, a girl was drawing a magic circle, but an assassin had come to deal with the girl's guardian. Blood from the knife dripped down, causing the magic circle to stop functioning, but the guardian managed to struggle and deal with the assassin to help his mistress stay safe. Taechai had protected Rin when the cyclist rushed towards her. He didn't know what kind of person could be so careless. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared beneath Taechai, and he sensed that something was about to happen, so he pushed Rin out of the circle. But she still ran to cling to Taechai, and then both of them lost consciousness and soon woke up in a meadow. Taechai ran to check on Rin and saw that she was safe. They then tried to find their way back because their phones had no signal. At first, they both thought this was just a remote suburban area, but Taechai gradually began to suspect that the magic circle had transported them to another world, as he was familiar with this kind of scenario from games. Rin didn't believe it, but when they encountered a large demon horse, Rin's doubts were dismissed. Taechai decided to help attract the horse's attention to help Rin escape, thinking that if someone had to die, one person dying would be enough. He lured the horse's attention to himself, but just as the horse was about to attack, a swordsman rushed out to protect him and fight the horse. From the bushes, an archer shot an arrow at the horse and then let a mage girl incinerate it. The archer informed them that this was a demon horse and its horn was very valuable. They would collect the horn to sell. Taechai had realized that this was a world with mechanics similar to a game, and he and Rin had been transported here through that magic circle. Now their task was to survive in this place. That night, the three people revealed that they were adventurers, and they noticed that Taechai and Rin didn't seem to be from this place because neither of them had any knowledge about it and were dressed quite strangely. However, if it was difficult to talk about, they wouldn't force the two. They then promised to take Rin and Taechai to a nearby town, but on the condition that Taechai had to make peace with Rin because she seemed to be angry about something. Taechai then went to meet Rin privately and apologized if he had done something wrong. She wanted him to stop thinking about foolish things like dying so she could live, because if he died, she would be left alone. He acknowledged his mistake and promised not to do such reckless things anymore. The next morning, they followed the adventurer group to the town. Although not as grand as the capital, it was very bustling despite being just a border town. They then planned to go to the guild to register as adventurers. Although they knew this would be a dangerous job, they would manage to rise up on their own. The group then gave Taechai and Rin a small amount of money to get by, as they had this horn and didn't worry about money. The two then went to the guild and met the receptionist there. She did the paperwork to register them. Initially, they both needed to check their magic power as it would be necessary for becoming adventurers. Without it, they couldn't register. Rin then placed her hand on the orb and 4 beams of light flashed in an instant, shocking the receptionist. She wanted Taechai to do it too. As soon as he placed his hand on it, the orb cracked, causing the receptionist to run away urgently. She then called the guild master to meet the two. He heard about their situation and informed them that they couldn't register here, so they would follow this girl. She then led the two to the house of a mage named Lemia, who would be responsible for re-measuring their magic power as the guild's measuring device couldn't handle it. She then gave the 2 devices she had made herself. They tried measuring, and Lemia found them quite interesting. Both had more than enough power to become adventurers, but she informed them that from now on, they would have to be her apprentices. Meanwhile, the assassins were desperately searching for those summoned from other worlds to eliminate them. Now and then, Rin and Taechai were known to have very high stats. Taechai's magic power was 120,000, and his strength was 40,000. Rin's magic power was 37,000, and her strength was 5,000. The reason these stats were unreasonably high was because even a royal magician like Lemia only had a magic power of 43,000 and strength of 6,000. In general, she was at the peak of power, but still only slightly higher than Rin. The reason she accepted both as apprentices was to teach them how to harness their innate power. If both mastered their power, they would be stronger than S-rank adventurers and royal magicians. Worse, he could challenge and destroy an entire country on his own. If he did so, he would become the king of a country and get whatever he wanted. Rin grabbed his head because he seemed to like looking at Lemia's 2 watermelons. The elf beside her, named Mura, was a bit worried about both of them. The next morning, Lemia gave them breakfast and taught the first lesson about magic. Specifically, to use magic, magicians usually have to borrow power from elemental spirits. Normally, a person can only use one element, but there are higher cases like Mura here who can use 2 elements, Lemia with 3, and Rin, who is the rarest, able to use all 4 types of elements. Rin somewhat understood, but Teichai wondered what his element was. Lemia didn't know this because Teichai wasn't a magician but a witch. The difference between the two is that magicians have to borrow power from elemental spirits, but witches are superior in using power directly from spirits through contracts. This is something a magician could never dream of doing, which is why she mentioned that he had enough power to wage war against an entire country. But he didn't like getting into such trouble, so he refrained. He now wondered about the elements he could use, but Lemia wasn't sure because there had been some witches like him who chose not to use the 4 basic elements, but used ancient magic to manipulate light and darkness or even space-time. Lemia then began her training course, and the person she would teach was Teichai. She then taught him how to use magic power to enhance himself, and he had to learn it today or he wouldn't get to eat. Meanwhile, Mura taught Rin how to use fire magic, which was the most basic. She had to imagine the flame and how it could burn. She then demonstrated, and Rin tried to imagine a flame burning with oxygen in the air. Her knowledge of chemistry helped her learn quite quickly. She found Mura not as strict as she appeared. Mura also believed that Rin would soon catch up to her. Rin then tried to imagine a flame burning with gas and successfully created a blue flame. Mura realized that Rin would soon be able to do unimaginable things that an ordinary magician couldn't do. That afternoon, Rin came to see how Teichai was practicing, but he was still struggling. Rin wanted him to try a little more. He then suddenly heard a voice guiding him to use his own magic flow, which allowed him to enhance one of his arms. He was happy that he could now have dinner. That evening, Lemia announced that Rin would continue to practice with Mura because she seemed to be making great progress under Mura's guidance. Lemia would continue to teach Teichai how to use enhancement on each part of his body. Since they couldn't yet know which spirit he would contract with, the fighting style he needed to master now was self-enhancement with magic power. And because his magic power was enormous, he should waste it without worry. And since he would have to use a lot of magic power tomorrow, he should eat well now. That night, Lemia and Mura both knew that the irrational power of both was very dangerous for themselves, as she knew about recent events in the capital and that it would soon happen here. So at least she wanted to teach both the basic knowledge to protect themselves. She would try to teach everything necessary in just the next 3 weeks, and time passed after that. Teichai could now go hunting monsters on his own, while Rin had mastered magic and knew how to combine elements to create her own sequence of techniques. Both successfully eliminated a herd of monsters and received recognition from Lemia. She noticed that both had mastered quite a lot in the past few weeks, but now they encountered the demon horse from their first day here. Unlike then, now both had enough power to fight back against it. In the evening, Lemia officially announced that both had completed their course and would have to leave now as she couldn't keep feeding them forever. She knew both were people from another world who had strayed here. Usually, people like them either got here by accident in an incomprehensible way or were deliberately transported here by someone. Judging by their reactions, it seemed that being transported was most likely. She didn't know who had transported them. but that person must be very powerful because teleportation is a high-level spell, specifically a space-time type spell. Teichai thought this was helpful, as few people could use it, so the targets they needed to find would be very few. Both would soon register as adventurers and go find the person who transported them to ask for details and request that person to send them back to their old world. That night, Rin came to find Teichai. He thanked Rin for following him here. If she hadn't clung to him then, he would have been alone here and died by that demon horse. Both thought about the interesting things that would await them on the road ahead. Rin then returned to her room, and Teichai suddenly heard again the voice that had instructed him before. He asked what it was, but it only said they would meet soon and flew away. After that, Teichai kept dreaming about that voice. 2 weeks ago, he and Rin had returned to town and registered as adventurers, meeting again the group of 3 who had helped them before. Being new registrants, they were usually only assigned low-level missions to rank up. Today, early in the morning, Rin had researched a brief overview of the world and the map to the capital. While having breakfast, the guild's waitress delivered a letter that the guild master had asked to give to Teichai and Rin. They then went to find the guild master, and he informed them that there was a mission for both of them. Specifically, it was to investigate a bar in the slum area. Recently, goods had been frequently stolen from large stores and smuggled in here through the slum area. Because this mission had failed twice, if it failed again, he would have to increase the reward and assign it to higher-ranked adventurers to handle. That's why he called both of them, as he believed they could handle it, helping them rank up while saving him money and reputation. Both then set out to investigate and would return when night fell. They followed Lemia's advice to lower their power to the minimum possible to avoid frightening others. Rin then discovered a type of fruit she liked being sold, but when she went to buy it, it was more expensive than usual. Just a week ago, this fruit only cost half a silver, but now it had doubled in price. It seemed that the recent theft incidents had caused a shortage of imported goods, causing prices to rise. The shop owner said that recently very few supply wagons had arrived, and there were rumors that it was due to monster attacks, which is why there were so few. He just hoped this problem would disappear soon because not only his shop, but every shop in the market was facing this situation. Teichai then bought some fruit to support him. Both believed this problem stemmed from the incident that the guild master had mentioned. Teichai knew they were about to face danger, but he believed they wouldn't lose. They then arrived at the bar mentioned in the mission and observed there for a while. Both then confidently entered and started mentioning that recently some items couldn't be bought in the market, so they wanted to join this network to earn a little extra. They presented a bag of money, but these people weren't easily persuaded to reveal anything, so both had to give them a beating to make them talk. After being beaten by Teichai, they confessed that they worked for a stranger. Being drunk, they didn't ask for a name, but just followed instructions to go to designated places to get goods. They didn't attack the merchant caravans. Not gaining any useful information, they decided to leave. But shortly after leaving, both sensed someone following them, so they actively ran away, forcing that person to reveal themselves. Facing them were 3 female assassins. Noticing the opponents moved quite fast, Teichai slightly increased his power and rushed to punch one away. Rin also launched an attack to blow away another who intended to charge, allowing Teichai to completely knock her out. The other side, realizing the situation wasn't good, threw smoke bombs to escape. Rin used wind to blow away the smoke, but the other 2 had already escaped. At least they still had a hostage to interrogate. The assassin was then taken to the guild master for handling. He imprisoned her and tied her tightly to prevent her from escaping or attempting to die to keep information secret. Rin and Teichai had spared her life, so it was up to her to decide what to do with her life. Rin and Teichai then met Mura again. She congratulated them on leveling up and had also heard about the recent issues that the guild and both of them had faced. Although there had been progress, the prices of goods were still rising. Mura had a solution for the fruit issue that Rin was concerned about. She knew of a fruit orchard that supplied and exported fruits to towns, but recently it had been repeatedly robbed of fruit, and the thieves had a witch protecting them, so the farmers were helpless in fighting back. They had issued a request, and Mura had accepted it and wanted to invite both of them to form a team to solve it. Mura had always acted alone before, but now having teammates made her quite happy. The three soon arrived at the farm and met the three people in charge there. As soon as Teichai shook hands with the white-haired young man who had sent this request, he suddenly sensed something. As the three led the group to tour the garden, Rin used her staff to scan the area. After a while, she detected some creature approaching. It was very large and not human. Right after that, one high-level ogre and three lower-level ones appeared. Mura rushed to handle the three smaller ones, leaving Teichai to deal with the big one. She lunged forward and swiftly cut down the small monsters, while Teichai increased his strength to a higher level to take down the big one with just one punch. That evening, the three discussed how those ogres were not native to this area, proving that someone had deliberately set them up. Teichai suspected the white-haired young man, but it was too early to be certain, so Mura wanted to wait and see what the enemy's next move would be. Meanwhile, a sorceress had been killing many creatures in the forest to collect their blood and turn it into power for herself. She was targeting Teichai's group and even had an invisibility cloak. During this time, the captured assassin realized how much her strength differed from Teichai's. The guild master had come to ask if she had an answer yet, and she did. Back to Teichai's group, they continued patrolling and discovered strange footprints. They followed them and found the remains of someone's campfire from the previous night. It was still warm, and Rin detected 3 humans ahead. The group then approached and discovered 3 thieves there. Teichai's group advanced and demanded their surrender. They seemed to underestimate him, only to be tied up immediately after. The 2 farmers took them away to turn in to the guild, while the white-haired young man came to shake hands and thank Teichai. Teichai now directly asked why this young man's hands were so soft, as farmers' hands should be rough from work, but his were like someone who had never known labor. Moreover, he seemed to know about the ogres, so he decided to reveal everything. Yes, he was behind everything and had arranged the thieves as well as sent the request to lure them here. His purpose was to test the abilities of Teichai's group. The sorceress from last night also appeared here and removed her invisibility cloak. She was the one who had been protecting the thieves in previous incidents, but now she was here to play with the group along with the white-haired man. The 2 girls chose to deal with her, while Teichai would handle the white-haired man. Mura wondered why she didn't act when they didn't know she was nearby, to which she replied that she didn't like assassination tactics but preferred direct confrontation. Mura then cast a fire spell, which the sorceress blocked with wind, so Rin had to use wind to counter and tried to buy time for Mura to enhance herself. The sorceress cut through Rin's whirlwind, but she still had water and earth to use. The white-haired man now called out his pet, an ice wolf. Teichai rushed to attack, but his blows couldn't touch the wolf. The white-haired man revealed that his pet was a Loja type, and someone without a hacky weapon like Teichai would never hit it. The 2 girls were now working together to attack the other woman, but she was able to block Mura, who had enhanced herself, and even use her as a shield if Rin intended to attack from a distance. She then punched Mura and rushed to attack Rin. Teichai was now completely helpless because only the 2 girls over there could use fire magic to fight this ice wolf, while his physical attacks were basically useless against it. The white-haired man revealed that he targeted Teichai just to assess his abilities. Now that he had the results, he had used the blood orb that the woman collected last night to feed the wolf. The wolf then turned red, and it only rushed in to deliver one blow that pushed Teichai very far back. He also coughed up blood, proving that its attack was very strong. However, he didn't intend to kill Teichai, but only wanted to turn him into his pawn. He would capture the 2 girls over there to use as hostages and manipulate him. If he didn't obey, he would turn both of them into toys for slave traders. The two girls now decided to fight seriously and stood up. Both would raise their power and change tactics. They wanted her to consider the previous fight as a small test for the performance they were about to put on. Mura then rushed in to attack. The woman had just blocked Mura's attack and was feeling overconfident, but Rin had rushed in with a lightning attack, forcing her to dodge, and Mura had somehow gotten behind her, kicking her away just as Rin created an iron sword and a lightning sword. She had to block the iron sword and was stabbed by Rin with the lightning sword. Still not satisfied, Rin created a dust tornado, and with just a small flame, the entire tornado would explode. As she still hadn't fallen after that explosion, Mura emerged from the smoke to deliver a direct slash at her. She still wasn't too badly hurt after that, but admitted defeat. She decided to retreat, and when she became stronger, she would come back to fight both of them again. Seeing her defeat, the white-haired man advised the two girls not to be rash as Teichai had already been defeated by him. He had used Teichai to force both of them to obey him. Teichai was now angry because he had the power to cheat and destroy an entire country, yet he was defeated like this. He had promised to protect Rin, and now it had come to this. He wouldn't allow the white-haired man to touch Rin and Mura. And then suddenly Rin heard that voice again. It revealed that it was the wind spirit. Although he wasn't yet qualified for a contract, it would make an exception and help him this time. It would lend him some power, and the price to pay was that his body would hurt like death. He accepted the trade-off and stood up. The white-haired man ordered the red wolf to attack, and he was blown away. But he didn't feel any pain and realized that this was the cheating power he should have had. He then ordered the wolf to attack again, but he used wind to counterattack. He not only neutralized its attack, but also dealt with it at the same time. Seeing this, the white-haired man became scared and ran away. Teichai couldn't accept letting him go so easily, but now his body was suffering the side effects of the power. He managed to shoot a wind slash towards him, causing him to lose an arm. He swore that he would meet Teichai again to settle the score, while Teichai had now fainted and was being restored. Some time later, Teichai woke up and met Limia again. She had cooked food for him to eat. She informed him that he had been unconscious for a week due to completely depleting his magic power. When he was brought back by Rin and Mura, they only thought he would regain consciousness after a while. But when he remained unconscious until the third day, both of them panicked and brought him to her for examination. She had never seen Mura so panicked before. She told Teichai that the two girls were currently investigating something. He stood up to thank Lemia and then recounted to her what had happened in that garden. She revealed that what he had faced was a red contract, which uses the blood of creatures for power and is a forbidden spell. Although it brings great power, it is very cruel. He also told her about the wind spirit whose power he had borrowed, and Lemia was very shocked because now she understood somewhat about his power. Meanwhile, the white-haired man had returned to report Teichai's incident to his cult leader. We now know his name is Kasim. The cult leader said that there would be an easy mission coming up for Kasim to vent his current frustration. At the same time, he approached the swordswoman named Grammy and placed a mark on her hand to make it easier for Kasim to control her. The cult leader then met two people in the guild and decided to leave. He also left a note for Kasim to send on his behalf. Returning to Teichai, him are informed by Lemia that him are a summoner-type wizard. Specifically, him will create a link with a certain spirit. The stronger your connection with the spirit, the greater your power will be. The key to mastering this power is that him must be able to hear or see the spirit. In this world, spirits are entities even higher than dragons, so basically spirits will be invisible to ordinary people. The special thing about Teichai is that if him connect with a spirit, the spirit will perform magic instead of wizards like you. And because him don't have to bear the pressure from releasing magic, the spirit can unleash techniques with extreme power. It can be said that this ability is what makes him have cheating power more than many others. The waitress of the guild then was glad that Teichai had woken up. Him asked where Rin and Mura were, and she informed him that those two had been gone since morning and hadn't been seen returning. So Taechai went out to look for them. When him went out on the street, him saw a girl being harassed by two random guys. Him approached, and she immediately clung to him as an excuse to get away. But those two guys were about to hit Taechai too, so him stepped back and kicked one unconscious. The other one then dragged his companion away. Taechai now realized that the girl could have handled those guys herself, but chose to cling to you, because him noticed her movements were not at all like those of a weak and delicate girl. She then introduced herself as Anastasia and said she had met Taechai before and was defeated by him with a punch to the stomach. Him remembered she was the assassin him had captured before. She had decided to quit being an assassin and switch to being an adventurer. And now she was also investigating the case of stolen goods in the black market from before and had managed to find a manor. When both of him attacked inside and tried to find evidence in this main room, Taechai found a letter left there by the cult leader. That evening, Mura and Rin had just returned from going out, and Mura believed Taechai would soon wake up under Lemia's care. Suddenly, both of them encountered a cloaked man with a sword. He rushed to attack, forcing Mura to block. He then signaled for his companions to shoot magic, but Rin managed to use a protective spell, so both were still safe. However, now they were in a 2 versus 4 situation, but Grammy used an invisibility cloak and suddenly attacked Mura and captured her. She originally didn't like doing this, but had to comply as it was an order from her superiors. Taechai and Anastasia were now entering a tunnel, because that paper stated that there was a horde of goblins that had absorbed red contracts under this city. Both of them then came to a gate, and Anastasia went up to unlock it using an assassin's technique. Him had originally thought she would live a normal life after being handed over to the guild, but didn't expect her to continue living this adventurous life. She was very touched that him had thought of her that way, so she told him to call her Anna instead of that long name. Meanwhile, Rin had cast a spell to temporarily escape from those 4 cloaked men outside. She encountered Grammy again, and she informed her that Mura was being held captive in that tower. She was doing this because her superiors ordered it, but because both were her prey, she didn't want either of them to be stolen by others. Rin thanked her this time and flew away. She then charged into the tower and saw this group was about to use a red contract on Mura. She knocked one away and then froze the rest to come rescue Mura. She broke the magic circle and brought Mura down. At this moment, Kasim and the cult leader also arrived here. He said he just came to greet both of them and had no intention of fighting. He announced that an army of 3,000 monsters would soon flood in here, and that would be enough to destroy this entire town. Kasim was quite disappointed that he couldn't meet Taechai again to get revenge. Meanwhile, Taechai and Anna had reached another door, and Anna went ahead to check, only to step on a magic formation and summon a golem. The cult leader and Kasim had now left. The fact that there were only 3,000 monsters was a lie, because the real number was 5,000 underground and another 2,000 outside. The cult leader was confident that this plan of his would succeed and be perfect to the fullest. Anna was now frozen in front of the golem, so Taechai had to come support her. Because he had very strong physical strength, he just needed to punch this golem until it shattered to finish the job. The door in front then opened by itself, and inside were the 2 children of the cult leader. Rin and Mura had returned to report the attack to the guild master, and she realized that attacking this place was the cult leader's goal, so there would be no way to negotiate. The theft of goods also seemed to be caused by them. It appears they had arranged this theft to gradually weaken the town before letting monsters attack all at once. The guild master wished Taechai was here, but the 2 girls believed that even without Taechai, there were still many experienced adventurers here who could fight. Lemia had also arrived and heard the story. She would help them fight to protect this place in Taechai's absence. Taechai now asked those 2 children what they were doing here, and they said they were about to wake up the goblins. They didn't care that the goblins would massacre the people here because they had this orb to command them. Teichai then had to rush up to fight the awakened goblin horde. He wanted Anna to step back so he could handle it, as these weren't easy to deal with. He then discovered that the two children were also being attacked by goblins, so he had to go rescue them. They had realized their mistake, so he had to bring them to where Anna was standing. He knew now he had to both fight and protect the three people behind him. Teichai asked the two children how many red goblins there were like this, and they said there were many spread all over under the city, so they weren't sure how many. And so Teichai knew he couldn't rest tonight. Meanwhile, Lemia had heard about the number of enemies and adventurer forces. The difference in numbers was too great, so she planned to concentrate a big blow on the main force of monsters outside the city to resolve them all and let the adventurers handle the remnants. Rin had an idea and wanted Lemia to let her try. Specifically, she would create a steam bomb by making water evaporate and compressing it. She would combine the earth element to cause the compressed water to explode. To put it simply, it's like boiling a pot of water, putting a rock in it, and closing the lid. The water in the pot will surely splash everywhere. The next morning, the monsters had arrived at the city gate, and Rin immediately created a pit below to make most of the monsters fall down. She then filled the pit with water and then used earth magic to create metal, heat it up, and cover the mouth of the pit. The reaction caused an explosion and destroyed most of the monsters. Lemia acknowledged that Rin's plan was effective, and now it was time for them to counterattack. The guild master then led everyone out to battle. The cult leader noticed that the ability test plan he had set up was still progressing well. However, the best part of the show was still to come. After some time, the adventurer army had destroyed most of the monsters. The person with the most merit after Rin was still Lemia, but not long after, the guild master heard news that many red monsters had appeared. Teichai had now returned here. Lemia didn't know how many people the cult leader had killed to get this much blood for the red monsters, but she had noticed the red ogres, so she rushed up to fight herself. She then asked Rin and Mura to buy her time to unleash a technique. She planned to launch a big attack to change the situation. Both then rushed up and helped Lemia prepare her technique. Teichai had informed the guild master that these two girls were Milo and Milo. They were the reason he was late, and after he helped them, they decided to follow him. Suddenly, there was a loud noise out there, so Teichai set off to leave. Anna knew she would only hinder him, but he had asked Anna to protect the town in his place. Lemia had now finished her technique, and only 3 red ogres survived. They didn't flinch at all, so all 3 decided to each handle one. Lemia unleashed Hellfire, Mura unleashed a Flaming Slash, Rin fired a magnetic shot, but the ogre still wasn't dead. She was out of strength and knew she was about to die at the hands of the ogre. She regretted not being able to say a few things to Teichai, and at that moment, he arrived to give her the chance to speak. He pushed back the ogre, and then used all his strength to wrestle it down and gave it another full force hit to be sure. He then introduced the 2 girls to Lemia's group and asked everyone to support him while he fought, as it seemed the remnant monsters had also arrived here. The cult leader and Kasim now knew that Teichai was stronger than they had anticipated. However, what they needed was an assessment of everyone's strength here, as he had already accounted for the possibility of failure. After all, he, Kasim, and the monsters here were all just pawns of a higher-ranking individual. The guild leader, upon hearing that only a few strong monsters remained and Teichai was dealing with them alone outside, believed that Teichai would return because he was the first to treat her like a normal girl. Therefore, she would also do her best to help Teichai. Suddenly, a cloaked figure passed by and said something to her that made her lose control of her mind. The others were now working together to deal with the remaining monsters, while Teichai was single-handedly taking on 3 red ogres. He knocked them down one by one with his full-force punches. Just as he finished off one, the other 2 were grabbed and devoured by a creature from underground. Lemia informed that this creature usually slept deep in the earth and rarely left its lair. It was a 2-headed dragon that typically didn't like to interfere in human conflicts. indicating that something had awakened it this time. The cult leader saw that now all the pieces were in place and wondered how much power Teichai would unleash. Teichai knew that he had no choice but to fight the dragon, as there was no escaping. He had asked Lemia to evacuate everyone else in case of the worst scenario, but Rin chose to stay with him because they had promised to return together. So Teichai told her to stay out of the dragon's sight, worried that if she were attacked, he would instinctively fight and lose. He then approached the dragon and tried to call the wind spirit, but there was no response. When he charged to attack, the dragon's tail swatted him away. He couldn't understand why he couldn't do anything against it and why it interfered in human affairs. Anna had come out on her own, and when Teichai asked why she was there, she regained her senses but didn't know why she had come. The dragon then attacked Teichai, and Anna pushed him out of the way, taking the hit herself. She was severely injured, and Teichai wanted her to hold on so he could get her treatment, but she knew it was too late. She wished she could have been Teichai's lover when she returned, but realizing he had Rin, she just hoped to be his friend. She then passed away, and Teichai once again realized that despite his cheating power, he couldn't do anything. He had been naive to think this power would help him protect others, but he couldn't do anything in the end. He called out to the wind spirit again, and it responded. He then met the wind spirit, Eri, in his subconscious. She told him that he needed enough determination to meet her and form a contract. The previous time was an exception to save his life without a contract. Teichai knew he couldn't blame the spirit, as it was his fault for not having enough determination. He had feared this power would turn him into a non-human creature, but now he was ready to accept this power and protect those he cared about. He asked Rin to take care of Anna for him, then approached the dragon with Eri's power. He asked the dragon why it interfered in human battles and if there was a way for it to return. The dragon only wanted to see his true power, and if he could make it submit, it would tell him the reason and leave. Teichai then unleashed his wind power to counter the dragon's combined fire and ice attack. As Lemia had said, spirits were higher beings than dragons, so Teichai easily defeated it. The dragon conceded and told him it came because someone requested it. That individual would continue to target him, and if he wanted to protect those he cared about, he needed to become stronger. It then left, and the cult leader returned to report to his master. That person instructed the cult leader to prepare for the next step of the plan soon. Some time later, the town began to rebuild after the battle. Teichai visited Anna's grave, hoping she would continue to watch over him. He then showed the others how he could summon Eri. He had made tremendous progress, so Rin didn't want to be left behind. They then discovered that someone had come here looking for Lemia. This girl is Alcina, the daughter of a nobleman. She came here on behalf of the king to invite the whole group to the capital. The group then followed Alcina, and Rin, who was sleeping, was pinched on the cheek by Rin to wake up. Lemia now asked the reason why the group was summoned, and Alcina revealed that the capital and the royal court are currently divided into two factions between the king and his younger brother. The king is a person who wants to do everything to unite the kingdoms, but his younger brother is conservative and opposes all of his policies. The king has summoned talented mages to help him build the country, but his younger brother believes that the mages will risk weakening the country, so the possibility of civil war is likely. When arriving at the royal capital, everyone noticed that this place was as empty as a ghost town, with people locking themselves in their homes out of fear. This has been happening for a while, and suddenly, Alcina was targeted by an arrow, forcing Teichai to protect her. That arrow was sent by assassins from the king's younger brother's faction. They believe that the policies of the current king will inevitably push this country to the brink of decline. Teichai's group was then brought into the palace to meet key figures in the court. Here is the royal archmage Bella, over there is the army commander, Sumela, and over there is Princess Charlotte. The king then entered, and Lemia spoke up, calling him by name and asking about this situation. Everyone thought she was being disrespectful to the king, but he had everyone leave. He saw that Lemia was still the same after all this time. Everyone was surprised that she was on par with the king. She agreed to help the king, but first she had to ask if he was the one who summoned Rin and Taechai here, to which he admitted it was true. Taechai blamed him for turning their lives upside down, and for almost getting them killed, and now having to kill for him. Lemia was also dissatisfied because he had dragged two unrelated people into this country's problems. He promised to take full responsibility for what he had done. Rin and Taechai then went back to their room and felt that at least they had found the person who performed the summoning spell, so it was considered a step forward. Right after that, Alcina came to let them meet Princess Charlotte. She confessed that she was actually the one who summoned them because she has the ability to manipulate space-time. She wanted to do something to help her father resolve the situation in the country, so she took the risk of summoning people from another world. She carefully selected people who had the ability to absorb magic and understand this world, and Taechai was chosen. The reason they were brought to a field instead of this place was because an assassin had sneaked in during the transfer process. Blood from the small knife dripped down, causing an unexpected glitch in the magic circle. As for the way to send them back, she apologized because this spell could only be used once in a lifetime, but she promised that when the battle ends, she would find a way to send them back even if she had to sell her soul. The two didn't blame her because she must have been very remorseful before bravely saying this. Indeed, they had almost died, but thanks to being summoned here, they had gained precious friends, so they would also try to protect them as she is protecting this country. As for returning, that could be dealt with later. Lemia then came to find him and told him to follow her. She led him to the arena to face General Simela. The council of officials didn't trust Rin and Taechai's abilities, so Lemia arranged this match for Taechai to gain their trust. He then took up the sword and rushed to fight with the general. He saw that she was clearly overwhelming, so he was about to use Eri but stopped and only used enhancement magic. After fighting for a while, both of their swords broke, so they switched to hand-to-hand combat. Everyone was amazed that he could fight on par with the general when he managed to dodge her attack and then pin her to the ground, forcing her to surrender. She apologized for testing him, but admitted he was indeed very strong. She then pinned Taechai down in return and asked if he wanted to marry her. She was willing to be his concubine if he wanted, and asked what there was to criticize about her. She's beautiful, has a perfect body, is strong and doesn't need others to protect her, and on top of that, she has a state salary and position of authority. However, Taechai temporarily declined to think about it more, because only someone with a problematic mind would refuse this offer. That night, he called out Eri to talk. He knew his own power was immense, and he feared harming others with this power. He was ready to use his full strength against monsters, but in the upcoming battle, it would only be ordinary soldiers. He also didn't want Rin to harm others, so he'd rather bear it all himself than let Rin get her hands dirty. Eri thought he was too kind-hearted but believed he would be fine. He then went back to the room to find Rin, but couldn't see her anywhere. After curiously checking several rooms, he accidentally saw Rin just coming out of the bath. So he ran out, closed the door, and banged his head apologizing. The cult leader had come to meet the princess at this time and wanted her to go rest as it was already late. The next morning, Taechai saw Rin tending to the palace garden. Since this place was busy with civil war, no one was doing these small tasks. Taechai then told her to prepare for Lemia's meeting. But during that time, the king's younger brother's faction had begun to keep an eye on the king's two new guests. They would see if both were a threat and find ways to eliminate them. Meanwhile, the king and his generals had begun mobilizing the army and preparing to attack the rebel faction. Rin and Taechai would also join the army, and after preparing plans and arranging the battlefield, Simela was ready to set out for battle the next day. Taechai was still a bit hesitant because he usually only fought monsters, but now he was about to participate in a war with humans. But that's war, kill or be killed. Simela also tried to encourage Rin that she just needed to win the battle and return, and they would get married right away. That evening, Taechai came to Rin's room to tell her to rest early, but she asked Taechai to stay with her tonight because her room was too big and a bit lonely. She shared her feelings about tomorrow's battle, and Rin thought that if she didn't like it, she didn't have to participate, because originally he was the one called here, not her. But she thought that she had chosen to enter the magic circle with him, so her being here was her own choice. She then leaned her head on Taechai, and he suddenly sensed something, so he told her to go rest while he went to close the curtains. Mura and Lemia were a bit worried about Rin because she seemed quite tense, but Lemia believed that Rin and Taechai would be fine. She suddenly sensed something, so she also became alert. An assassin then snuck into Rin's room and intended to assassinate her, but Taechai had realized and set a trap for him beforehand. They then wanted to know who sent him, but he desperately lunged at Rin and was blown away by Taechai, who punched him repeatedly in the face. He didn't want to let anyone important die like Anna did before. The assassin then saw Taechai stop and tried to escape, but knowing he couldn't run away, he chose to die to keep the information secret. The next morning, the rebel army had arrived at the city gates to engage in battle. Taechai called out Eri and launched a move that created a crack right in front of the enemy's march, preventing them from advancing. Thinking the enemy would temporarily retreat, Sumela was concerned about the enemy not bringing many weapons, so the other side might be all mages. And it was true when the enemy didn't retreat but began to deploy magic rings. The king's army began to be affected by the spells cast from the other side. Taechai had a look and discovered that the bunch of rings was what helped the other side deploy magic. According to Lemia, those were magic stones and not cheap to find on the market, yet the enemy had prepared up to 1,000 of them. However, the rings would drain the life force of the owner, so the enemy would kill themselves if they kept casting spells for a while. Although the soldiers wanted to let the other side die to avoid fighting, the Archmage thought that they were still citizens of the country, so they would try to prevent as few casualties as possible. Lemia had a plan and it needed Rin's help. Rin then had to stand ready. The enemy had discovered that Rin was about to do something, so they aimed at her, forcing Taechai to have Eri create a shield for Rin. She then used magic to create rain, turning the ground under the soldiers into mud, and then a lightning strike to paralyze the enemy troops simultaneously. Sorry to the Tensei fans if him feel ticklish, because I do too. The enemy general then met the strategist of the rebel faction, and he thought the strategist's role was over, so he swiftly disposed of him. The group of Taechai then celebrated their victory, but in the middle of the party, Rin and Taechai snuck out. They went to the flower garden and saw it had flourished again. Meanwhile, Kasim and Grammy were feeling bitter because Taechai's fame had spread far and wide, but Kasim was confident that he had something very powerful in his hands to deal with Taechai decisively at their next meeting. The next morning, as Taechai woke up, Rin was already by the bed waiting for him. He suddenly said he felt nauseous and then apologized to Rin, saying it was because he ate too much last night, not because of her face. Suddenly, Mura and Lemia came to report that the king needed to see Taechai. The group then went to the main hall, and the king and princess brought out the country's treasure collection for Taechai's group to choose from. Mura chose a dagger, Rin saw a magic staff, Lemia chose a magic ring, and Taechai found a katana. He was then called by Sumela to the training ground to test the new sword. Lemia also wanted to test her ring there, so Taechai couldn't escape from Sumela. He then had a stomachache due to last night's feast, so he temporarily escaped. He then went to the street and was seen by the people. Everyone knew he was the one summoned by the king to fight and protect them, so they came out to shake his hand and continuously praised him. He then met Kasim again and realized he had lost one hand. Kasim reminded him that it was he who took away one of his hands, and he would never forgive him. He wanted to have a fair fight with him, and if he didn't accept, he would poison the water source of this place. Taechai then had to decide to follow Kasim, and during that time, Rin and Mura were still practicing for the competition. Lemia knew that Samela organized this training session to make the soldiers feel more calm, as they might have to deploy at any time. Kasim had led Teichai to an empty alley, and he wanted him to fight fairly by letting him use this artifact on him. This would limit Teichai's magic power to be equal to his, meaning that whoever wins this match will receive the respect of the other side. Teichai accepted the challenge despite Eri's continuous warnings about the risks. He still accepted and began to fight with Kasim. He drew his knife to rush at Teichai, but having only one hand made Kasim still at a disadvantage when fighting directly. So he switched to using magic, and Teichai also had a way to respond. They then continuously exchanged blows to the point of being scratched all over. Kasim wanted to resolve everything in the next move. He conjured a water ball when he saw that Teichai couldn't move anymore. Teichai thought about how to counter and then remembered how Rin used magic by imagining. So he slashed out a wind cut that split his technique in half and pushed him flying into the wall. He admitted that he had lost and acknowledged that Teichai's talent was stronger than a persistent person like him. He then told him to break the artifact to regain his power, but suddenly a ghost appeared from the artifact aiming at Teichai. Kasim knew nothing about this because the cult leader was the one who gave him this artifact. Grammy rushed out to protect Teichai, and Kasim also used magic to buy time for Grammy to break the artifact. But the ghost was now stronger. However, Teichai had also regained his power. He asked Eri to compress the surrounding air for him, and he slashed out a lightning bolt that completely destroyed the ghost. That afternoon, he took recovery medicine to give to Kasim, but Grammy knew he wouldn't accept it because Kasim's pride had been shattered, as Kasim had realized that effort sometimes still can't beat innate talent. But Teichai dared not accept because he was also just trained by a talented master. Kasim was then supported by Grammy to return home, while Teichai heard the sound of bells. The people informed that it was the war warning bell. The cult leader at this time had reported the duel between Kasim and Teichai to his master, and they saw that Teichai was indeed getting stronger day by day. That night, the army set out for battle, and Rin and Teichai had promised to protect each other. On the side of the king's younger brother, a marquis under his command had asked him to separate his troops so that he could focus on targeting Lemia and the two people from another world, because he had a secret weapon. The next morning, both sides had arrived at the battlefield. The king's younger brother didn't know whether after this battle, history books would view him as a villain or a hero. On the king's side, they were rallying to boost the soldiers' morale. As for Teichai, he had to maintain the mindset that he must protect those he cared about. The two sides then officially entered the battle, each with their own area to showcase on the battlefield. However, Teichai stood out by jumping straight into the enemy camp to fight. The cult leader and his master now wanted to see how Teichai would face off against what they had given to the rebel side. At this moment, Rin encountered a female warrior with a personality just like Grammy on the enemy side, while Mura faced the Baron, and Lemia confronted a mage capable of disrupting magic. She told the enemies she had just defeated to leave this place if they still wanted to keep their lives. Teichai had made his way into the king's brother's tent on his own. Eri also appeared to add weight to Teichai's words. He knew exactly how strong Teichai was, so he would stand here and negotiate with him. The soldiers then went outside, and Teichai made it known that he wanted to negotiate peace on behalf of the king, as he realized both brothers cared for the people, and it was only due to ideological differences that this battle had occurred. However, he came here not to suggest stopping the war, but to threaten him, as he had enough power to destroy an entire country, so bringing him before the king wouldn't be difficult. But suddenly, his strategist began to use some kind of magic, which spread and entered the fallen soldiers. Lemia was still toying with the other mage at this time. As soon as she saw an opening, she delivered a move that severely wounded him on the spot. He realized the gap between him and her was too great, and she wasn't merciful enough to spare him, so at least she would let him say his last words. She then created a giant fireball, and when the other mage saw that she didn't need to chant spells, He knew he could never match her level in his lifetime, so he accepted his fate. As for Mura, she could no longer tolerate the Baron's arrogant attitude of looking down on others, so she decided to deal with him with full force. She then used her fire sword to charge at him. He was confident that he had the upper hand when he managed to deflect her sword, but she had circled behind him and used her dagger to take his life. Back to Teichai, the king's brother had now asked him why he didn't want to be king when he had enough power to do so, and Teichai expressed his thoughts. He found Teichai truly interesting and said if Teichai had followed him, things would have been different. However, he still wouldn't change his mind, because giving up the battle now would be like throwing away his own honor. At this moment, what the strategist had been secretly doing was discovered by Eri. Back to Rin, she was still in a stalemate with the female warrior, but she had the advantage of continuously launching rapid attacks, causing the female warrior to be somewhat injured. At this moment, the defeated soldiers had been turned into soulless corpses by dark magic, attacking everything they saw. The two former enemies suddenly became allies to deal with this horde. The strategist now revealed that he had secretly prepared this spell across the entire battlefield. He had long not considered the king's brother as his master, for his only master was that person. Teichai realized that the one he served might be the person the two-headed dragon had alluded to. He had originally incited him to create this war to draw Teichai in, as the quarrel between the two brothers wasn't worth caring about in the first place. Everyone now recognized the greatest danger. Lamia seemed to know something about this large magic circle, while the strategist decided to turn himself into a monster to serve his master's purpose. 200 years ago, this continent had a period called the Bloody Chronicle, where this spell of turning soldiers into undead first appeared since that time. When that war ended, over 700,000 people had lost their lives, and now it was happening again. Lamia recognized this as dark magic, and unless it was dealt with at its root, it would have no end. The king's camp had already been surrounded, and Rin had offered to hire the female warrior to support her in battle. The female warrior agreed, and now the first thing to do was to regroup with everyone. Now, the king's brother wanted Teichai to deal with these corpses decisively as they could no longer be saved. He realized he had been wrong, and from now on, history books would view him as a villain, but it wasn't too late to stop this. Teichai now wanted to use his power for a single purpose, to protect others. He was ready to sacrifice himself to use all his power to stop this event, but Eri stopped him. She revealed that she had been wrong not to trust him. This wasn't her true form. It was only a part of her power that she had separated and brought to Teichai. She feared that if Teichai touched all of her power, he would destroy himself. But now she realized she was mistaken because he also had something he needed to protect. Eri would now disappear, and her true self would help Teichai from now on. He then escaped the time freeze and reunited with Rin. He hugged Rin and apologized for letting her get hurt, but now he would stop this war. He then called forth the true form of the spirit, and it dispelled the magic circle, returning the soldiers to normal. This was the first time Lamia had seen such a thing happen. Teichai then met Sylphie. The female warrior recognized Sylphie as one of the 4 strongest spirits and the queen of wind spirits. Although Eri had disappeared, her memories and feelings remained, so he could consider Sylphie as Eri. However, things weren't over yet as the strategist had now truly turned into a demon. Teichai asked Rin if she was ready to be by his side at all times and places, and she accepted. But the female warrior wanted them to save the flirting for after defeating the demon. He then took power from Sylphie and flew up to the demon. The demon still had consciousness and revealed that Teichai being summoned here was his master's wish from the beginning. Soon this world would be turned upside down, and that person would appear as a savior, and Teichai would be an important piece in that plan. But Teichai rushed to punch him because he would never accept that. He continuously attacked, leaving the demon only able to defend. While fighting, he expressed his reasons for fighting, and then finished with a blow that sent him straight into the ground. The demon wanted him to finish him off so his duty would be complete, otherwise, Teichai would always keep the fatal weakness of not daring to kill. But he had bid farewell to the life of an ordinary person when he accepted this true power. He then struck the demon with a lightning bolt, obliterating him. After that day, the country returned to peace. Teichai soon woke up after using too much magic power. He saw everyone by his side waiting for him, and Lumia called the princess in. She informed him that since the day he fell unconscious, each girl had been taking care of him daily. The country had returned to its former bustle, and Teichai's group was appointed as royal advisors, to be summoned only when the country needed them. The king's younger brother had been captured and executed. Teichai's group soon set off to return to the border town. The princess came to bid farewell to the group and promised that someday she would find a way to send them both back. They both wanted her not to try too hard as they also liked life here. On the way back, Teichai was determined to find out who was behind pulling the strings. He didn't care if he was called a cheater, as long as he and Rin could survive. And with this, the film comes to an end.